was hard to imagine a future for myself at that time. But after I had been sober for maybe a year or two and was working some part-time jobs, I really noticed how much I connected with the 12-step communities, with my sponsor, with being of service, just secretarying meetings or, just being the cleanup guy. It felt good to be of service, and I wanted to explore what it would be like to work in treatment.
And so Mike and I really didn't have any ambitions about being, in those early days, about being leaders. We were just so excited about doing the work with people. And then I think after bumping up against some of those challenges for a couple of years, it really put the onus on us. We had decided, we need a community that has a stronger sense of recovery and well-being if we're really going to work in this field. And I think it's going to mean that we have to be leaders and strike out on our own.
Welcome to the Brainwaves podcast by Opus, where we sit down with industry leaders to unpack their journeys, explore key challenges, and talk about how they're shaping the future of behavioral health and healthcare technology. I'm your host, Humberto, and I'm also the CEO of Opus in my spare time. Today, we're speaking with Greg Vorst and Michael Nolan, co-founders of Embodied Recovery in Campo, California. Greg is a licensed therapist with decades of experience, and Michael is a certified addiction counselor in long-term recovery. Together, they've built a program that blends trauma-informed care, mindfulness, and body-based healing in a non-tech first model designed to treat the whole person. They've also led a nonprofit, Mellows, that brings community-centered healing to a wider audience. We'll explore their journeys, why they created their company, and how they're redefining recovery in a high-speed, tax-saturated world. Isn't that so? Greg, Michael, thanks for being here today. Maybe let's start with your background. How did your personal experiences led to the work that you're doing today with Embodied Recovery?
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, we're so happy to be here.
Yeah.
All of you.
So I can offer, my name is Mike Nolan. As you had mentioned, I'm a certified addiction counselor. I'm in recovery myself. I got clean for the last time, August 8th, 2007. So just recently celebrated 18 years. But like I said, that was my last time in treatment. I had been to a few different treatment episodes prior to that. And then, getting into treatment when I was maybe 22, 23, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. It was hard to imagine a future for myself at that time. But after I had been sober for maybe a year or two and was working some part-time jobs, I really noticed how much I connected with the rooms, with the 12-step communities, with my sponsor, with being of service, just secretarying meetings or, just being the cleanup guy. It felt good to be of service, and I wanted to explore what it would be like to work in treatment. And so I went back to school and did a 2-year program to get credentialed for addiction counseling, and then worked as part-time counselor, working graveyards and swing shifts and all sorts of different things, and then became intakes and assessments, and then program manager. And then Greg and I met working at an outpatient program together. And we had shared some experiences where I received some great training in that program that I went to. And I was fortunate enough to be hired back there. So I spent a couple years to ask them if I could work for them, because I felt they knew what they were doing. They did the treatment the right way. And they said, not yet, just finish school, do your thing. Thanks for staying in touch. We're happy you're doing well, but no, we're not going to hire you. But after a couple of years, I guess I must have broke them down, and they said, okay, fine. You can do a part-time gig only. I said, that's fine. Right. I want to learn.
As long as I get my foot in the door.
That's right. And it turned out to be enough. And they were just an incredible team of clinicians, and everybody on the same page. And there was so much strength and security within that community. They unfortunately closed in 2015. And then I moved to some different treatment centers. And then it seemed like there was such a big disparity between the safety in the container and the strength of the program that they were offering versus what I had experienced afterwards, where there just seemed to be some breakdowns across levels of care and within the clinical team that I didn't really know how to make sense of. And it seemed like that was something that carried over with a few different organizations after I had left that first program. And one of those programs that I was at is where Greg and I met. And so I'll let Greg share a little bit about his background.
Yeah. And I'll say something just interesting on the front, and then I'll talk about a little bit about my story. But I think Michael and I really loved the work that we were doing for these other organizations. And we were running into a challenge where we were just noticing that some of either the leadership teams or the key players were themselves needing a lot of support in their recovery, were struggling.
Mm,
And that created a really potentially dysfunctional or dangerous environment for the team and foremost for the clients. And so Mike and I really didn't have any ambitions about being in those early days about being leaders. We were just so excited about doing the work with people. And
yeah.
then I think after bumping up against some of those challenges for a couple of years, it really put the onus on us. We had decided like we need a community that has a stronger sense of recovery and well-being if we're really going to work in this field. And I think it's going to mean that we have to be leaders and strike out on our own. And so it was really a surprise to us when we came into that decision. There were a lot of momentous bumps along the way that helped nudge
Mm,
us into that choice. And but then going back to my background, I didn't struggle with substance use, but my pathway nonetheless, I think really resembled in every way somebody who struggled with addiction. So I was a spiritual seeker in my early 20s and 30s and found myself chasing highs and experiencing these real lows. And even though a great deal of the material that I was coming into contact with was helpful to me, it was clear at a certain point that there just wasn't the steadiness in my life,
mm,
that I was on some kind of emotional roller coaster. And I probably at that time would have qualified for being in like a mental health program and getting support for depression and anxiety and things like that. But I didn't see myself in that way. I didn't have that awareness yet and was often chasing spiritual highs and going to workshops and doing things like that. And then at some point, I realized that there was a space for me in the recovery rooms too. Even though I wasn't abusing alcohol and substances, I could get help for my codependency. And I did a lot of work in the ACA program. And then my life started to take on a character that was more steady.
mm.
And a lot of the things that I was learning in recovery, or rather in the spiritual world, began to drop in ways that were more tangible. So, going through my own personal recovery journey really was foundational for, um, I would say, receiving some of the fruits of spiritual practice. And then alongside that journey, I had or as a part of that journey, I had two disciplines that I was really deeply involved in, which Mike and I both practice these now. The first was Sundo, which is a Korean Taoist form of breath work, embodied breath work. And that's one of the mainstays of our practice. And we can talk more about that in a bit. And then I was also a Course in Miracles student for a number of years.
Mm.
Though I was deeply engaged in those practices, I really didn't see the fruits of them until my life settled down and I began to practice some of the things that recovery really asks of people. And so, yeah.
Very interesting story or history background. I have a couple of close family members that are in recovery, and learning about the steps and learning about the process of recovery has been very enlightening for me. I've been in the industry for 13 years. I've been with Opus for 10 years, but I'm not in recovery myself. So in conversation with our customers, they want to know that you actually know what goes on, because it's not like any other business, right? You need to know in depth,
Yeah.
and learning more about the steps and the program itself. She's in close family members in Overeaters Anonymous and also
Yeah.
Workaholics Anonymous.
Yeah.
And the foundation is the same. And I've come to realize that essentially everyone should be taking at least a portion of it. It sounds like that's what you did, right? It's like you weren't
Yeah.
in recovery for any kind of substance, but you realize there are a lot of aspects of recovery that are fundamental to you having a healthy life and
That's
having
right.
and be mentally stable, right?
Yeah, that's very true. And I think the world is probably yet to go through that awakening. I think more and more people are recognizing that they can get their needs met in those rooms. And I think that it'll be an exciting day when everybody recognizes the value and the need for those kinds of practices and
Yeah,
engagement.
and I think it's probably a timing thing. As you both know, men are less open to any kind of help when it comes to everything. We tend to push things down and deal with it. But I think it's, at least from my perspective, family and friends, there's been improvement in the openness to recovery. I'll tell
Uh-huh.
you a short personal story. My wife and I went through a traumatic loss of our daughter 6 months ago. She was 31 weeks pregnant and we lost her. And it was, I mean, it's been the hardest time of my life, obviously, and for her too. But had I not been open to seeking help and seeing it, I never seen a therapist before. So my immediate reaction was, what is a therapist going to do for me? And, I played the guy card and, we're still obviously working through it. This is a long-term thing, but had my wife not been sort of the catalyst to, hey, we've got to deal with this. It's not just going to go away because you go back to work. I probably would have had a harder time, and even longer term, you would have hit me more, because I think for me anyway, I went into like protect her mode first, and eventually I was going to deal with my stuff, but that's just not the way the brain works. But recognizing the importance of having a stable, and I'm interested in hearing about your breath work too, because that's something my wife is really big on, and I've been learning a lot about it. So yeah, just the openness to talking to someone about things you're going through is been really powerful for us, especially me, I would say, because she's been talking to therapists longer. Tell me a little bit about Sundo and kind of how you guys, I assume you sat in the room and said, everything we know about treatment and therapy for folks in recovery is great. What if we incorporated this other modality of mindfulness? How did that come about?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I just want to say I'm so sorry for your loss,
Yeah.
Thank you. I
thank
appreciate that.
for sharing that.
Yeah.
And what a clever story. Like I'll take care of her first, and I'll get to my stuff later. That
Yeah,
one
kind of
really,
like you think you want to put your decision making on a spreadsheet and say, okay, this first and
Yeah.
that and the other thing, right? It
Yeah.
just doesn't work that way.
Well, yeah, and
And
I
I
think
found
there's
out the hard way. You know,
yeah.
and I'll just kind of parenthesis. When I mention the loss
Yeah.
of our daughter, sometimes people are a little startled, like, oh my God,
Mm.
he's talking about this. And it's something that we've decided together that we wanted to talk about. We don't want it to make it go away.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, on that note, I really appreciate you sharing it, because I imagine there are people who will be listening to this at some point that might be struggling with something that they're not sharing about. And
Mhm.
even you telling us about the spreadsheet, I think that just gives so much insight to a process that a lot of people are wrestling with themselves. And so I really appreciate you opening up with us and sharing that. You were asking before we landed on that about how Sundo came into being. Well, I can share a little bit. So when I was going through my training as a therapist years ago, I was really fortunate to be trained by some really gifted talk therapists who did a lot of deep affect and feeling work with people. And I began to get this intuition, as great as that work was, I began to get an intuition that some people, their experience of their body and where they were in relationship, their body and their nervous system to their feelings was, in a sense, was so unprepared for that emotional journey that in a way it was wise for them to be holding back, like that they didn't have the tools, they didn't have the support, they didn't feel the safety within their own physical sense of self, let alone emotional, to begin to go into that deep, deep emotional terrain. And so in those early days, I was a young, inexperienced therapist, and I was excited about feelings work. So I would want to try to go with a gusto into those regions with people, and began to see early the limitations of that, and perhaps my own neediness to feel effective or something as a therapist. And I had to work on weeding out those things so I could really be of service to the clients. But at that time I was doing my own Sundo practice daily, and I was really going through the emotional training and the process groups in my own. So we had a separate training, and we would do process group for therapists. And I found how intensely that breath work, how much it prepared me for my own emotional journey, and how it gave me a sense of anchoring and a sense of safety within that I could lean into and do this deeper emotional work. And it had been a personal experience and an intuition in terms of working with people. I began to feel like, man, I just need to get this person on the floor and teach them how to breathe. And then we can do more of this journey and give them some sense of centeredness and well being in which they can then have those experiences within their body. Because the emotional, when we really when we really grieve or we really get in touch with our feelings, those are powerful felt senses and they can overwhelm us if we're not well acquainted with ourselves and well developed physically to be able to house some of that. And so, last little technical bit, and then I'll pass the ball to Michael, just that Sundo, as a developmental system, it trains a number of things. The first ones I would think about is it helps somebody to experience both calm and focus at the same time.
Mm.
And usually people can be too much in one direction. So they're focused, but they're hyper vigilant, or they're overextended in some sense, or they're calm, but kind of spacey. And so
Mm.
Sundo really creates this beautiful marriage of those two energies where somebody can be very focused and very calm at the same time. So you have a lot of presence and then this sort of spaciousness beyond it. And that's what we need to do deep emotional work. And then the second piece is the most foundational, is that it teaches us through the lower diaphragmatic breathing to regulate our nervous system in such a way that we go into the parasympathetic branch, which creates the relaxation response. So I can move to rest and digest and all of those things that I need to do if I'm processing food, but also processing my feelings. I
Mm.
need to not be in fight or flight or freeze. I need to be in a state that's health inducing, where I feel good from within. And so when we can train people to begin to have that experience in their day-to-day living, what happens over time is that they can stretch that out so that they feel regulated and in their center when they're facing the hard stuff. And that's what I meant earlier about now I have an anchor to face those areas of my life that are most challenging, that are most strenuous. And there's so much more to that journey. Mike can speak to some of it, but that, it basically, we do that practice each morning in our program. And then that allows people to have a sense of well-being and presence that makes them really ready for the next emotional process groups and so forth.
When
Amazing.
you had asked about, was there a time when you sat down and said all of this, the psychoeducation and process and addiction treatment material is great, but what if we added this component of Sundo? There certainly was a conversation along those lines. And in part it was around this idea that so many treatment centers are saying we do yoga every Saturday morning. We're a holistic treatment center. We treat
Mm.
mind, body, spirit.
Hear that
And
a lot.
yeah, right. And it just, in some cases, maybe rang as inauthentic, or it was still the, Brene Brown TED Talk and some Gorski's relapse prevention worksheets, which are great. And so it's not to downplay those. It was just, we saw so many treatment centers that were working off of a very one size fits all model. And so many people are coming into treatment having already been practicing a way of living that's been unfulfilling, unrewarding, self-destructive, and damaging. And when we're saying we want people to get well again, we want people to engage in their recovery, we want them to practice that so rigorously every day that it becomes embodied, that it
Mm.
becomes a way that they're just meeting their life day to day, rather than conceptual recovery. Come learn some fun ideas, and hopefully.
Or so it doesn't get and I know this from personal experience, it doesn't get associated with like going to the gym, like another chore I got to do, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so getting people, like Greg is saying, into this experience within their bodies where they can relax, where they can tune in, where they can in many ways reacquaint with themselves, reestablish a relationship with themselves and their body, rather than feeling so contentious in that relationship. I hate myself. I hate my body. I hate the way I look. I wish I were, thinner or more attractive or faster or stronger. This is just saying, where are you now? What do you notice now? What's coming up now? How are you feeling now? And then just be with what's there now, rather than make it go away, try to fix it, try to change it. We're not saying clear all of the thoughts out of your mind. We're saying just just breathe. And as you continue to bring your attention back to the breath again and again, now your breath becomes almost like this safe haven for your experience of life. When difficulty arises, I always know I've got this place I can come back to where I feel reconnected with myself.
I think that's really important. Again, not somebody in recovery, but I think there's a lot of value in knowing where you are now, because I think there's a lot of emphasis in recovery in terms of when you discharge or when you finish the 12
Yeah.
steps, and it's for somebody who's not in a stable state of mind, it's
Hmm.
really hard to think beyond like the next 10 minutes. And even when we talk about things here at the company, like we're going to launch a big AI thing. Okay, great. 12 months from now, but what are the milestones between now and then that are going to make you feel like we're making progress? You guys are taking it back all the way to like now, not even tomorrow, like right now. Here's a tool that you guys can use, that everybody can use to deal with who you are now. Because yes, the change that you're looking for is going to take days, weeks, months, years, decades. Who knows, right? That's why nobody's ever formerly in recovery. They're in recovery for life. It's a process
Yeah.
forever, right? That's very interesting.
Yeah, it really can be, 10 minutes at a time, 10 seconds at a time, where the level of discomfort that I experience in my body, especially in maybe that first week of detox, is so outrageously uncomfortable, and my mind is just screaming at me to run as fast as I can. Where's the shortest part of the fence
Yeah,
around
that
this
I can jump
property that I
over.
can jump over?
I heard all the stories. We were embedded in the treatment center, so I know exactly how it
Yeah.
works.
Yeah. There are absolutely some comfort medications and some things that can be prescribed to help people feel a little less anxious. But when I can begin to learn and implement a technology that I don't need to go and meet my doctor to get a prescription for me to feel better, it can be an empowering experience, right? So
Yeah.
when I know that if I can just take these next 30 seconds that have been really uncomfortable for me, and rather than judge myself, judge my past, judge the experience, make it wrong, say it needs to go away, and do my best to breathe through it, what can I notice on the other side of that? Now, this is not something that I would encourage people to do in isolation, to just do on their own and hope for the best. Having a sense of safe community is so valuable in a process like this, in early recovery especially. But it's a really empowering experience for people to have when they can notice their capacity to impact their emotional state through this breathwork practice.
And I think it's especially powerful because it's free and you can do it
Hmm.
anywhere, and you don't really need the perfect environment, right? You can do
Well,
it in
maybe
your
not when
car.
you're operating heavy machinery,
Maybe
but
not
yes,
when you're doing that. Other than that,
yeah,
you can pretty much do it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely.
Well,
I was going to say, when I was learning meditation, for some reason, I was convinced that I needed to have the perfect place, lighting, it's got to be quiet. And the first thing I learned was you should be able to meditate at a construction site, because that's the whole purpose. You're not supposed to like remove yourself from the environment. You're supposed to be able to concentrate around, the monkeys in your brain.
Uh-huh.
But it's actually very, very interesting that you guys use that. What is the reception of, say, I admit into your facility today for detox? Presumably they know they're coming to you because you guys do things a little bit differently,
Uh-huh.
but perhaps their assessment of a uh, treatment facility that operates under the mindfulness umbrella is what you've learned in the past. Is like they do yoga, they play a couple of videos. It's not as intense as, hey, we're going to do breath work as a team every morning. How does it
yeah. Yeah.
work? Are people open to it right away? How does it go?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a spectrum, and often there can be a profound experience of freak out because oftentimes, if you're coming into recovery, you've been so far outside yourself. If you're struggling with mental health challenges, depression, and anxiety, you're so caught in stories, or you could be future tripping or thinking about things outside yourself. And so it's a really radical moment when you realize, wow, this practice is starting and it's not going to stop for an hour and a half. And the breath work is 40 minutes long. And so, you know, Some people, they experience an immediate sense of relief. There's some people that are kind of in the middle of that, where there's, there will always be some discomfort and growing edge in it. But there are some people that right in the beginning, and maybe this is a minority, but it can be felt as a sense of dread because I'm coming back to myself and I have all of these maybe dark or negative thoughts or feelings that I haven't tended to, that are just below the surface of all my busyness. And so, that can be a challenge for somebody, but as they begin to anchor and do the breath work and put their focus there, then they become more well equipped to address those feelings, address their use of narrative. There's one piece I wanted to say, you had mentioned something about it being free. There's there's also this aspect in this wherein there's a freedom where even if my life is objectively messed up in tons of ways, like I've got
Mm,
problems, I have things that are not solved that I can't solve right now. The interesting thing about this freedom is if I really attune myself to the practice and the discipline, what I can learn from it is that I can feel a really overwhelming sense of good feeling independent of the circumstances in my life. And that is so incredibly empowering that
yeah.
I can start to experience good from within, even if these other things aren't solved. And then the really interesting building block there is now once I know how to produce that good from within and do it consistently, now I can go and address those things little by little from the good within.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we certainly, like what Greg was saying, get people that come in right away, knowing what it is that they're signing up for, and saying, "I'm excited to try this out," or "I've done meditation retreats in the past, and this is something that's up my alley, and I'm looking forward to." And then there's people that are coming in saying, "I just heard you had a good program. I don't care what you offer. I just need to get well." And and so the the attitudes towards practice um, are are great material to work with whichever side of the spectrum they land on.
Yeah, yeah.
So the people that say, this is the most amazing practice I've ever engaged in my life, and it's already changed me, and it's only been one practice, versus those that say, this stinks, I hate it, I don't want to go anymore, you can't make me. That both sides offer so much insight into someone's process that it's all workable, right? And so what we're asking for is just people to share what's true for them rather than what they imagine we would want to hear from them. And so I would say, having worked with both clients on the addiction side and the mental health side, the clients on the addiction side tend to offer their criticisms more freely,
Yeah.
and the clients on the mental
Yeah.
health tend to want to caretake the feelings of the clinical team more so.
That's
Not make
interesting.
them they don't want them to feel bad.
That's right.
In the addiction track, no problem.
That's very
Yeah,
interesting.
it's broadly that way. Yeah, sometimes it comes out the other way, but there is a tendency of that.
Yeah. We've been surprised to just see how many people have been so receptive to the practice and have really connected to its value, just
Yeah.
as they have engaged in the practice day to day.
Can you think of a case or maybe share a story of an admission or a client or a patient that you guys treated that perhaps you have a high level of confidence would not have been successful? I guess you could say about, all of your patients and clients, but can you point to maybe one person that really benefited from the way you guys do things different from other treatment centers?
Sure.
It's a hard
Yeah,
question. Probably should have asked you to prepare, but if you can think
well,
of one.
no,
No, not at all.
it's okay. I think that there's a number of people that come to mind, and
Yeah.
something that we started to notice maybe in like our second or third year operating was that the people that tended to do best with us were people that actually had been chronic relapsers. So people that had admitted to a number of treatment centers already prior to coming to us
Yeah.
tended to do really well in our program. And I think that in part it was because our empowered living teaching series and the Sundo practice and the experiential work that we're doing with people resonated with something that a lot of them hadn't seen before. There's I guess in thinking about the question, is there somebody that we've seen that that we weren't expecting to do well and did do well? Was that the question?
Yeah, somebody that you think maybe wouldn't have been, maybe they would have
Yeah,
relapsed again after going through your
sure.
program or through
Yeah,
another program, and because they incorporate your method, you think they're successful and still in recovery.
yeah. We actually have a really beautiful testimony about this from an individual, because they had gone to what we think is really one of the finer programs in the area. Actually, that program's no longer, but they had really been earnest in going through the whole gamut of EMDR, and uh, and we've had a couple of people who've gone that route that have tried all of the trauma modalities that are out there, and they've gone to really good programs and gotten some solid support, and it was still so clear how much they were suffering. And so this individual had really it was almost like an endless list of psychosomatic complaints, and some of them even necessitated surgeries. But one of the things that was really remarkable, and I would add to what Michael said, the people that have tended to benefit, and this individual fits into this category, are people that have gone to others, but have also stayed with us, that they stay for the duration of the program. And then even after, in some cases, they stay connected to the community and they practice Sundo with us. This person was very vigorous about that. So even on their weekends, they were practicing Sundo, but they had a
Mm.
really extreme condition of lockjaw, in addition to depression, severe depression for the last 10 to 12 years. They had tried every form of antidepressant to no avail. And they had a lot of other chronic pain and issues. And
And a history of severe trauma.
yeah, and all of those things were together in this one particular case. And they also abused substances, but that wasn't the main issue. And in working with them, they stayed with us for a good period of time. And why I say that that's so critical is, usually in a healing journey like that, somebody needs to have enough trust in the team that
Yeah.
they can begin to go through a process of transferring, that we call that, it's a psychotherapeutic term, where they begin to transfer onto the project their feelings and their thoughts onto the therapist, and that usually leads to a lot of tension and upset, and the client will go through an experience where they're really mad at the team, and it can be so rewarding to be held in a space of acceptance and appreciation, and really met in that deep frustration. But so there are so many things that supported this individual. It was the teachings. We have a really extraordinary teaching series, the Empowered Living teaching series. We have all of this experiential work, and then we do the Sundo, and we as clinicians really hold people's feet to the fire till we get to the working issues in a loving way. But little by little, week by week, you could begin to see all of the layers of rigidity, the internalized, um, all of the dis-ease from the frustration of the personality that was being expressed in the body began to melt away. And they not only went from being dismissed from the Stanford clinic, they were going to have a surgery on their jaw for lockjaw. When they completed the program, that was dismissed, but they then later went on to become so expressive in life that they're now pursuing acting. So it's just a
Wow.
totally, yeah, totally different. And this was a person that was very rigid when they spoke. It was more almost, I don't want to say computer like, but it was devoid of a lot of feeling.
Mm.
And this person was able to really get in touch with a lot of anger and could just shoot laser beams at you with their eyes. And so this was someone that you saw just carry a lot of tension in their approach to life. And so as much as this person really resonated with our programming, I also want to say that they held an attitude that that is maybe what I've seen as one of the best indicators of someone's ability to succeed in recovery, which is just a degree of willingness to take suggestions despite their feelings about those recommendations. And so
Mm.
this person
Had so
said,
much
I know
courage.
that the way that I've tried to live up to this point hasn't been working. And so I'm willing to listen to you. And what they were saying was that when it turns out to not work, then I get to hate you
Yeah.
free
Yeah,
of
yeah.
charge.
But
I'm
right
gonna give you the
now,
benefit of the
I'm
doubt, but
going
it better work.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and they threw themselves into it completely, and the other piece about this is they found themselves happy, contented, like enjoying themselves. They found a smile that they'd never had, And so they went from being very rigid, shut off from feelings except for anger and rage, to getting to like the tenderness, the hurt, the trust, and the open-heartedness. And their life just completely changed. And this is just, that's one really powerful example, because there's also the clinical experience of having been dismissed from a surgery that was planned and was an absolute necessity.
It's amazing how the body and mind, I heard somebody say this on the podcast last week. They said people thought about the body and mind as two different things, but they've always been the same.
Uh,
It's amazing how your mental state can affect your body.
Yeah.
When we went through the loss of our daughter, I started experiencing so many. I've never been sick. I've always been healthy. I pride myself in never taking medication. I'm one of those guys. And I went through maybe like up to last month, just random weirdness that I've never had before. Like blisters and psoriasis and all kinds of stuff that I never experienced before. Of course, it came from my mental state and what I was dealing with before, but we tend to treat things differently, especially in Western medicine. You've got a body issue, here's some medication for it. You've got a mental issue, here's somebody to talk to. But it's very inspiring that you connected both of them. Greg, you touched on EMDR and trauma programs. I want to go back to
Yeah.
that in a second.
Yeah.
But I want to ask, in my research before the podcast, I found out, and you mentioned the teachings. You said you have one of the teachings that you guys have. I found out just from my research, there are 12 proprietary teachings plus the daily embodied practices using Sundo. Can you touch on just like the gamut of what they are, just like surface level, what the teachings are and kind of what they
Yeah.
cover?
Yeah. And
And we're going to need
that's
another
awesome.
45 minutes.
Yeah. Some other time people can, if they want to go more deeply into these, some are available on podcasts and on our website. And we do a monthly talk that's available to people, one of the teachings. But the teachings, they really have a lot of depth and breadth. So they cover a lot of the basics that are in recovery. So you can get things like boundaries and codependence,
family systems.
family systems, habit formation, but they're all held within a spiritual framework. So we're really working with the best of what we know from addiction science and ancient teachings, inspired spiritual teachings. There's kind of a weaving of those throughout the curriculum. We start with the teaching called The Farmer and the Cow, which is an ancient Taoist and Buddhist teaching that we've adapted for mental health and addiction treatment. And I'm not going to get into each of them, but this one's foundational. And I think it kind of spells out something that really distinguishes us from what's happening in the treatment world, because the other model that is really prevalent is the stages of change. That's typically what you'll run into. And there's value in that model. And earlier when I was mentioning EMDR, it wasn't to say that those models are ineffective, because there's great value in that too. But the practice of the stages of change, there's these 4 stages that we go through that are essentially more preparatory until we get into the action, which is the 4th stage. So I go through, what is the first one? It's pre-contemplation. So I'm contemplating, and then I go through contemplation, and then I go through a preparation stage, and then I get into action. And then the 5th stage, which for me, I would want to be something like a transformative. What happens is people move into maintenance, and then stage 6, sadly, is relapse, and the whole cycle starts over again. And what's key about our work and The Farmer and the Cow is that it's hinged on that I could transform myself, that I'm not just going to be this being that's continually trying to maintain, but that something in me could fundamentally change, so that I'm living from a new place from within. And that's what's spelled out. So we have a different model in The Farmer and the Cow, but that is wed throughout our whole teaching series. And we're teaching to evoke that felt change in the individual. So we're seeking to wake up that possibility in the individual. So it's not just like a lecture where we sit down and say a bunch of ideas. We're really trying to create a felt shift in the experience of the individual, because it's the experience of the new that they can live into. You want to talk a little bit more about?
Well,
Yeah.
just yeah. So the Empower Living teaching series. So our psychoeducational curriculum is so it's 12 teachings that covers about 13 weeks. And like Greg is saying, the purpose was to pull from these evidence-based educational models and weave throughout these spiritual concepts that so well align with these notions of healthy boundaries and undoing codependence and acknowledging my ancestry or transgenerational shame and trauma and where I find myself in that healing journey and decision making and habit formation. And so there's so much rich information, but more than just the teaching of it, or like Greg is saying, it's not so much a lecture as much as trying to invite people into finding themselves in the information that's being taught, where they connect, where their life's experience aligns with what it is that's being discussed. And so the Empowered Living teaching series is just a part of the programming. Obviously, the Sundo practice, which we had talked about. We also do an inner child, inner voice group. We do a healing through creativity group. We do a what else? Inner child, inner voice, mindfulness, loving self. So kind of a weaving of some mindfulness-based stress reduction, and then some self-esteem work, and then we do some ecotherapy, and then obviously the individual addiction counseling, individual psychotherapy, family therapy, case management, treatment planning, drug testing,
All the things that
nursing,
are,
yeah,
All the
everything.
things that come with the
yeah,
territory.
yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. Let's go back to EMDR and trauma because there's something that's being talked about often, the use of psychedelics in treatment. I'm based in
Yeah.
Colorado and it was, I think, legalized last year for assisted treatment here. And I think we had the first clinic open in Denver 2 weeks ago.
And there's a
It
line out the door
sounds
constant, I'm assuming.
not yet, I think,
Oh,
because it's $3,000 a session.
fair enough.
Ah,
Okay, sure.
That's going to curb a lot of, but anyway,
Yeah.
a lot of, and I could be wrong about this, so correct me if I am, a lot of the foundational aspects of what you guys are doing with breath work and the teachings and everything that you brought into your treatment program kind of contrasts with what I'm hearing on the sort of psilocybin psychedelics treatment of having somebody go, I think you mentioned, Greg, earlier, going through an experience assisted and kind of, going through the motions of that. How do you guys see the future of psychedelics assisted treatment in addiction treatment and mental health? I know there's a lot of evidence-based studies and looks like the Army has been doing a program for a long time, but do you think that that could be something that becomes prevalent in especially addiction recovery? And if not that, how do you see the treatment of addiction recovery in the next 10, 20 years, just based on what you know? This one I
yeah.
definitely should have prepped you for. This is a loaded question.
No,
No,
no, no. It's a
it's
great question.
yeah, and it's something that we've often talked about because we see these trends as well, and so it is over the next 10 to 20 years. I'm sure it'll retain a degree of popularity, and we've seen it's interesting thinking on the addiction side of things. So maybe setting strictly mental health to the side for a moment, but when someone is struggling with an addiction, as an addict in recovery myself, it makes sense to almost categorize substances as like most problematic to least problematic, right?
Mm,
And so I can justify using these things because they're not as bad as these things, but I'm not looking at the underlying issues that are driving that decision to pursue a substance to relieve an emotional or spiritual hangup. And I'm just thinking that, well, California sober is a thing, which it just irritates me that California is getting this reputation of you can be sober while smoking weed, but whatever,
right.
that's besides the point.
It's the addictive mindset, right? Like I have friends who have addiction issues, but they're not just addicted to drugs. They're addicted to the gym. They're addicted to work. They're addicted to
Yeah.
everything they get into.
Well, that's right. And so with something like psychedelics, and we've had a number of people that have done, ayahuasca or ibogaine retreats, and then, still coming back saying it helped for a brief period of time. And yet I'm right back to where I was before I went, if not worse. And so this isn't to say that it's the psychedelic experience that creates that. It's just if I'm not working on the underlying personality issues and the character defects, and I go into a psychedelic experience and feel maybe a greater sense of compassion or empathy for myself or the traumatic experience I had in the past and can see it from a different vantage point, that's all fine. But that when that psychedelic experience is done, what I come back to is the same personality, the same character, the same self that pursued that psychedelic experience in the first place. And so what's likely to happen is that as the tension of life grows and I continue to pile up difficult experiences, I hold that in the back of my mind that, well, I can go back for another retreat in maybe 6 months and then I'll clean
Hmm.
out some of these other things. But there's really no character or personality work being done in
Yeah.
conjunction. And again, this isn't to be some slam of psychedelics in a therapeutic context or say that they can't work. We've just seen so many people that are looking for a chemical solution to a spiritual or a personality based problem, that if they can work on those character pieces while engaging in a daily practice of self regulation and breath work and coming back to a place of really holding a love of self, an authentic sense of self, then um, the view of psychedelics as appealing, it just seen in a very different way. It's not held as the cure to my problems. It's, I've worked through these things. I know who I am. I can hold
Hmm.
my history as I am now in this moment without needing to take another substance to take the edge off.
Got it. So it's more like exercising. You have a regimen of continuous improvement of yourself by going to the gym and doing all the healthy things, as opposed to like a diet pill where you just take it and you're right. And then you go through kind
Sure.
of roller coasters of good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, right?
Yeah, and I guess my concern with it is just that it can be so there can certainly be a clinical indication for psychedelic assisted therapy, and I also think that as an addict, seeing that open up as an option, my mind thinks, oh sweet, I can get a doctor to prescribe me psilocybin. My mind doesn't think, this might be an answer to the things that I've been struggling with. I'm thinking I can get the doctor to prescribe me a substance that I want.
Yeah. So I could get some high, within the bounds of still treatment.
Yeah. I would just say too, it's early, and I think if each generation, if you think back to antidepressants, they were supposed to be the cure all many years ago. I think that the returns on what was promised are probably extraordinarily low compared to what the fervor was going into that many years ago. And of course, there's a lot of business in all of this. You named 3,000 at the front. So I think that some of what it remains to be seen what's really going to happen with it. But with any, even in the last iteration of the all of the what is it that sorry the heroin that was given prescribed
Yeah.
Oxycontin,
Oxycontin, there were studies that came out that were saying, no,
non-addictive.
it's not addictive. And so I think a lot of things get published in a certain way when there's a drive for a sale. And I'm not sure how this is going to play out. I'm certainly not an authority on it. What I can say, though, is we have like utter confidence in what we're doing. Like, we're not doubtful that we can get results with people if they're willing to do the work. This is so obtainable. And that could be if you're wildly depressed, if you're extremely addicted, if you're willing to essentially earn your well-being, it's here for you.
Mm.
And we have a way to support people with that. So the last thing that we would want to do is take away the power in their mind to choose rightly for themselves. And so, and this is a little complex if I've got just a moment to explain it. What I mean essentially is, if I'm ill, part of my experience of illness is coming from choice points in my mind. My lack of well-being is coming from a decision that I'm making. Often when people enter into recovery, we're helping them connect those choice points to their suffering. They might think it's just happening to me, or this is just life, or so forth and so on. But it's very empowering to recognize I'm doing this to myself by the choices that I'm making, by the way that I'm living. I'm creating this strain in my life. Now, if I can go to a substance outside of me that takes all that away, I don't have to go through the growth journey or the sense of empowerment that would come from recognizing I can decide for something that's constructive for me. I can live from a place that's incredibly rewarding. And so we want to show people that that the answer is within them.
Mhm.
The answer that they're seeking is actually inside of them. It's encoded in them. It is them. And right now, they might be living from a place that's limited, from a place of conditioning or from circumstances or past trauma. But if they can awaken that true self within, they'll find themselves a ready solution to every problem. Whereas anything that people are taking from without, we see that they create more and more dependency on that thing outside.
And like you said, whether it's cookies or working out or shopping or whatever it might
yeah. So that's our thing. But and then just anecdotally, we've seen so all the people who have done outrageously well with that aren't coming to us, but we do see a number of people who are not doing well who've done the full gamut of that, and in some cases it can be quite dangerous.
Got it. Okay, I've taken up more time than we had allocated, so I want to try to wrap up and let you guys go back to
Yeah,
running your
yeah,
business. I'm going to ask you two questions so we can close. The first
yeah.
one is I'm always interested in knowing what people thought they might wanted to be if they weren't what they are.
Uh,
So, if you weren't Greg and Mike,
yeah,
if you weren't doing what you're doing now, is there like a
yeah,
dream
yeah,
job? And I'll tell
yeah,
you
yeah.
mine. If I wasn't doing this, my dream as a career was to be a commercial airline pilot. Completely unrelated to what I do now. Never going to happen. I've normalized it, but that was my thing. Is there anything that you guys do? And a lot of times when I ask this question, it's completely unrelated to what they do currently, which I think is life.
Yeah.
What would you guys be other than if you weren't doing what you're doing?
That's a
You wanna
fun
go
question.
first? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess it's hard to imagine where I would be absent being here just because getting into recovery has informed so much of the decisions that I've made in my life and how I've structured my life. And so to not be here could mean that I didn't have recovery. And then if that were the case, I have no idea what I would be. But if I'm thinking about like a dream job, when I was younger, I wanted to be a professional athlete. I'm too old for that now. I wanted to be a football player or a football coach. I played lacrosse in college. And so if I wasn't doing this, I'd maybe coach high school lacrosse and do some woodworking on the side.
Those are all sound fun. You can still
Yeah.
teach. You can still teach
But yeah, but
Yeah, yeah.
I've got a
lacrosse.
better platform for teaching now. But, maybe we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, oddly enough, I cannot think of anything I would be more happier doing. Like, where my life has come has been such an adventure, and I'm so excited for the next chapter, which is us opening the Melo Center. So, I think maybe in the future, what I'd like to grow into more would be us doing more full-scale workshops and, spending time in the Sundo community. But when I was young, what I wanted to be, and I pursued it for quite a period of time, and I'm glad I moved on from it. In my early life, I was in the performing arts. I sang opera, and I enjoyed that a lot. And then I reached a point in myself where I needed healing, and the journey of beginning my healing journey created a sense of disinterest, or I became less passionate about that part of myself. And so I'm so grateful that I had that experience, but I think this is the best job that I could imagine.
That's awesome. Well, the opera singer background certainly explains the radio voice. You have a little bit of our Howard Stern,
Oh,
very
wow.
deep modulated
Okay.
voice. So hopefully it's helping with the podcast that you guys are
We
recording.
hope
Yeah,
so too.
yeah.
I try to speak as little as possible.
Yeah, you have to recognize it, right? He's got the voice.
That's right. It's
He's the
all
main
good.
guy. The last question I have for you guys is: do you have any book recommendations or podcast recommendations or YouTube video recommendations? Not everyone is reading a paper book anymore, but that you would
Mhm.
recommend to folks watching this podcast.
Mm.
Yeah, there's a ton of books that we love and podcasts and I'm maybe more on the YouTube side than Greg, but so Pia Melody, she's got a bunch of fun training videos online around codependence and undoing codependence. Marshall Rosenberg, he's got some great trainings on nonviolent communication on YouTube that are great. And then Greg and I have our Empowered Living podcast series. So on the last Wednesday of every month, we'll present one of our Empowered Living teachings to the community for free. We record those and then we upload those onto, wherever you listen
And
to your
what
podcast.
is the name of the title? What is the title so people can find you? Can they look you up
Yeah,
by the
so it's
name or?
Embodied Recovery, Empowered Living series,
Okay.
I think is the name of the podcast. And so they can get a feel for our teachings there. And then as far as books go, we, like Greg had mentioned earlier, we really love A Course in Miracles. I would certainly recommend Pia Melody's book, Facing Codependence, John Bradshaw's book, Healing the Shame That Binds You, of the Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, Addictive Thinking by Dr. Abraham Tversky.
Yeah, it's endless. The Tao Te Ching is another really extraordinary read.
Very good. Well, sounds like we're going to have to maybe schedule a part 2 of the podcast to talk about the Melo project.
That would be awesome. Yeah.
We'll coordinate, and I'd love to hear about that. Unfortunately, we didn't get to today, but thank you so much for being here. You guys have been great. I appreciate you.
Thank you. We
for having
appreciate
us.
you too. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.